now? Okay, we're recording. So regardless of attendance, we will have the session just in case.
Great. I do see a couple of people signed in, so.
Great. Karen, do you have a link to a notes document? Anything that we could put in the chat? Or do you have a set of running notes somewhere?
I was hoping to be able to put it up on a Google Docs, but I don't have a good Google Docs to post it on.
Okay.
I did send it out on the email.
Oh, okay, great.
So I'll have that. And I was looking, looking for some information about the operational readiness levels. So I could share my screen for those two documents, because I do have a Word document with the.
Sure. Let me make you the presenter in case you would like to. All right, you're the presenter, so if you'd like to share your screen at some point, you can do that.
Okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and do that. Right. We might be, if I can see who all is here attending. I think we've got a good set of folks here. We can go ahead and get started. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. We're recording this session so that what we hope to get out of today's talk is some guidance from all of us regarding recommendations moving forward for the ESIP session, merely in defining what a starting point for defining what we mean by trusted data. And so I have, there's a couple of areas that are kind of making this discussion important now. One is that our disasters cluster has been working very closely with the All Hazards Consortium, and ESIP has stepped up with our 3DM, our decision, data-driven decision-making workshop. And in fact, there's another workshop coming up April 13th in New York City, and I am planning on going to that. And I think Bob Chen will be going to that, and perhaps Ken Kaiser, you're on the line. Are you also going to be attending that meeting?
It's not shaping up to be that we'll travel. If we end up getting the opportunity to present it, maybe remotely.
Yeah, right. So anyway, I've been attending weekly phone calls with that group, and they're working on with their sector representatives on identifying what kind of data they need as they go through their response, or actually 4 phases. One is what they call blue sky. They're just basically monitoring situational awareness. And then they go through varying levels of impending disaster. One is the first step after situational awareness is looking for, they know something is coming, and trying to get some information on how they can best be prepared should, in general, like should a storm hit. The second one is that the storm has hit, and it's kind of a normal storm. And the third one after that is that it's a catastrophic storm like Hurricane Sandy. So it was a pretty interesting discussion on Monday about the kinds of things people from the various sectors involved in All Hazards Consortium, not just electric power, but also food distribution, which is supporting grocery stores, regular distribution of materials. There was somebody from UPS providing comments, telecommunications, and then there were 2 or 3 perspectives on the electric power sector, trucking, and a lot of things involved in that. So quite an interesting discussion, and they are looking forward to ESIP identifying some data products that they would like to integrate into their system, and they're looking at using the testbed that we've supported, the GeoCollaborate that Dave Jones is hosting, and using that to evaluate some data products, factoring into their use cases. So that's going to be a big discussion on the April 13th meeting. So we have a bit of a ways before we get to the point of having trusted data as an outcome of the ESIP Federation. But if we're successful, we could be looking at being able to identify something like that later this year. And so today's meeting was really intended to kind of take our thinking a further step. We've had some general discussions about data-driven decision-making and trusted data. Actually, we talked a bit about trusted data before we actually had the workshop series in play. So what I hope to do is kind of get some feedback and perhaps some inputs from all of you today about what we might use as a definition. I think that having a good working definition of trusted data, even as a starting point, even a definition that would evolve over time as we learn more, is going to be really valuable. So at the winter meeting, I had mentioned this. Rama had invited us to talk to the information quality session, and these are my notes that are up on the screen here, and they were also copied in the notes that went out. So this was really intended as kind of a starting point. So maybe what I'd like to do at this point is just kind of open it up to discussion to see if, number one, if am I on the right track? Are we in a good position now to start defining what could be a working definition for the ESIP Federation regarding trusted data? Because this would be a definition not just for us in the disasters cluster, but potentially as a path for the ESIP to identify, and I don't know if certification is too strong of a word, but to identify other data, trusted data products within its other service lines. So let me open it up to some feedback.
Karen, this is Phil Balin out in California, and I've joined your calls from time to time and have some specific ideas about trusted data.
Great, thanks for joining.
One of the things I'd like to see is some phrase in there that this trusted data gets used regularly in exercises that states do, and that they do outreach to familiarize people with how the information should be used, what it can and can't do, how to connect to it. And that's one thing. I would hope that trusted data would have a statement of data interoperability so that it's not linked to one software and can be used by many of the software, certainly that we in California, in our earthquakes and our flood responses, we depend on a series of them, but as more and more we rely less on a particular software than we do a data set that is from a trusted agency that's in a format that we know what to do with it, that it has the fields that we're going to use for decision making, meaning that there should be, and this is part of that outreach, is the people that are going to use the data, do they understand how to use it to get at decisions they need? And so that's a kind of generic quality that I look for. So something on data interoperability, something on that this data is used and exercises so that it gets exercised in terms of its usefulness, and that people really need to get familiar with it. That's just a statement in after action reports that we see out here time and time again, that people aren't going to use it if they're not familiar with it. And that would be good. The other thing is that, I don't know if you can put this, but if the data can be operationalized so that we can have a dependence that it's not just here 1 year and 2 years, but that somehow that data gets built into some agency's function and is supported in a regular way, that would be good. Again, I'm just looking at that one page that you had up on the screen and kind of pulling from what I see there.
Yeah.
Okay. So let me stop there. I don't want to take up too much time, but yeah, that's some thoughts of mine.
Very, very good points. Those are kind of the qualities then that the definition has to encompass. Another comment?
So Karen, to build off of what Phil was saying, this is Tripp. I think that not only those statements of here's what this data is and here how it should be used, but maybe kind of a more broad statement of, does this data set include any type of free training, not only documentation, but potentially free training that's out there from the NASA side, at least. A lot of the times they'll do RSET briefings and things like that for different data sets. So it could potentially include a training aspect. Two other things that I was thinking about that I didn't know if they were overtly stated in here as I was skimming through, was the document talks about freshness and speed of delivery, but it doesn't talk about method of delivery. And one of the things that we are struggling with in some of my customer bases right now is the answer for how to provide an urgent data source is you email the scientist in charge of it and they email you back with the answer. But that is obviously a process that is not necessarily the safest. So not only is the data kept up to date and, is it available quickly, but is it available quickly in a manner that is stable? Is it getting posted to an FTP website or a open data website or something like that? Or is someone trying to do an email blast with it every hour? So obviously, if it's going to an FTP site or something that can be harvested by algorithms or APIs, then folks might have a little bit more confidence in being able to get a hold of that data, because that kind of leads into my last comment. Lots of people have good data, but if that data is not available in the moment that it counts, or it can't be guaranteed that that person would not be on vacation in Taiwan or something like that, they're hesitant to use it. So maybe we also talk about the method of delivery, not just the speed of delivery. And then my last comment is from working with some of my emergency management folks. They are hesitant to start to use data sets and bring those into their common operational picture in the event that those data sets would not necessarily be available in the foreseeable future. So I think that part of our definition of a trusted data source also needs to have not only the data age and kind of when it was last updated, but also the foreseeable runway, at least until when it's, could potentially not be there. So if, let's say I'm a NASA PI and I've got a great project that's funded through 2020, I think that part of our definition of trusted data should include in the metadata, this product is guaranteed available until 2020, so that people can have that confidence to adopt it now, but also be monitoring that situation closer to 2020 and making contingency plans in the event that that data wouldn't be available in the future. So there's just some thoughts from my side.
Yeah, thanks, Tripp. I think those are really good clarifications. I think Phil used the word operationalize, and so I think there would be a number of qualifications that would need to be in there for trusted data that, like you say, it's going to be it. So yeah, great comments. So do we have other input?
Could I follow up on what Tripp said, because he brought up the element of time, and we've been talking about hazardous material plumes in our state and exercises regularly, and they have a really short shelf life. So some of the data, especially NASA creates, that is done with the imagery, but that has to do with processes that move kind of quickly. It'd be good if the appropriate metadata gets attached to the imagery so that people understand it was, when it was modeled after the event, how good it is for how long. And certainly that's in regards to some types of information, but as a lot of the data I believe that NASA does create is often modeled, certain parts of it probably have a shelf life and a usefulness and should contain a little bit about, additional contact information or things like that allow it to be used properly. So I was looking at, I wasn't seeing that, but I know that we've recently talked a lot about that out here.
And your example again was
chemical plumes. When you send up imagery to get information about the nature of a particular plume or contamination spill, it marks a particular period of time, and it can be used. It may change quickly, in terms of its usefulness. A plume is constantly changing, obviously, in concentration and spatial distribution, and frequently we rely on modeled information, and often a process, especially the emergency response, may take information from the field after it's occurring as ground truth of this modeled information, and then rerun its model again. And then you kind of want to know, well, when was this redone, or at least be aware that this may be redone in the course of whatever the particular process that's being modeled is. Does that make sense? Like when we have an earthquake, we immediately get two sources of damage probability, one from the USGS, their shake cast, and another from the e-decider that NASA has created that Maggie Glasgow uses. But as we understand, as they get more feedback from the field, they may run the model to make it better tuned to what's actually being reported.
Those are very good examples. Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to come up with a way of characterizing those kinds of changes from the examples. But these are short-lived events that could play a role, and obviously if the gas plume dissipates and you can no longer detect it, you're not going to have that data product.
Yeah, and a lot of your not a lot, but several of your products fly after a damage event, and they record changes in structural damage. And then as ground truth gets, it models it. But as ground truth comes back about what is actually damaged, then it may get run again. So that's another typical process, because I think you use that in, you used it in Christchurch's earthquake too, as well as other places.
Yeah, very good points. Okay, can I invite some more ideas and inputs?
Hi, Karen. This is Bob Downs. I just wanted to say a couple things about the relationship between a trusted data product and the source, that is the location or a repository, if you will, where the data might be acquired. I think we need to differentiate between those in our discussions, but at the same time, I think we do need to recognize that there is some linkage. That is, if you go to a particular source and you get data that is not what you would consider trusted or trustworthy, over and over again, you might decide that that source is not the place where you would get your trustworthy data. Conversely, if you go to a particular source and you each time you go there, you're getting data that you would consider trustworthy, then you might associate the trustworthy data with that particular source.
Very good point. And that's why, yeah, we want to be careful that when you develop a certification process or a trusted data labeling process, that in order for it to stay meaningful, you have to be really careful about that. Yeah.
Karen, this is Bob Chen. Couple points. One related to the availability issues. There are some, fairly standard reliability, maintainability, availability statistics or analyses that people do. When you have services up, you want to know, are they up 99.9% of the time, or do they have downtime? That's in the short term. As someone noted, there are also the longer term availability, but there are services that are available for monitoring that. And certainly in the hazard application area, you might want to expect a higher RMA standard, since it could be tapped at any point in time. And you want services to be fairly robust and redundant. The other point, I just thought it might be worth stepping back and asking what it is about trusts we're aiming for. I mean, one aspect of trust is liability. You want to know that if you use data and it's oversold or whatever, that if there's harm done, that how do you protect yourself from blame, or how does that apply in terms of responsibility, either for errors or not using data or whatever. So I guess one question I have is whether it's worth thinking about how to get some basic legal analysis of liability for data use, and then for a body that is saying that these are trusted data, do they take on liability if it turns out not to be that trusty, but people took action based on this certification? So, there are ways to protect from it. There are expectations from the user community that may play into this. Obviously, a lot of businesses provide data and are, work out ways to protect themselves, but also enable them to operate. So, I think it's a kind of an area that few of us know much about, since we're not lawyers, but it's worth thinking about.
Very interesting point. Yeah.
Karen,
So,
I think
just to build off of what Bob was saying really quickly, I think that when we're looking at service levels and how many nines something has, it might also be good to point out if it's got geographic redundancy, because a lot of people will back up in a different building on that same NASA center because it's under the same IT contract. And if something really, really catastrophic would happen to that place, even if the systems are normally 99 and 3 nines availability afterwards, if something really catastrophic would happen where both centers of gravity, even if it's a few miles away or something like that, would go down, that might be worth folks knowing is geographic redundancy, in addition to the service level agreements that Bob was mentioning.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Just
Karen, I was
Someone
just going to add to put appropriate disclaimers to the section that you're on. USGS does this constantly with the derivative information that they come. They take the best, available geologic information. They predict something, and then they explain at what level of resolution, you should be using it at. And just that word disclaimer, because they've been using it for decades, might be something good to have in the trusted data.
Very good point, yeah. So I suppose in terms of a definition, we would be at some point coming up with a list of the kind of information we would need associated with something that we want to consider a trusted data product. So yeah, a field that addresses disclaimers. And it sounds like this is something USGS then, it would seem other USGS and perhaps other government agencies would have had to address this. So that's a good hint. Let me see here.
So it may just be an existing field in the metadata. It may be an additional field in the metadata, but with my Esri hat on, there are plenty of people out there that do not understand coordinate systems and do not understand that if I take one layer in one coordinate system and combine it with a layer in another coordinate system, my areas are actually way off. So I don't know if it is a field that should be required for any type of geographic data. If something's already in like a GIS type format, like KMZ, KML shapefile, but we may want to have some like a blurb on the Trusted Data website to teach people about coordinate systems, or something in the metadata that says, look, this is in XYZ coordinate system. You need to transform it if you're going to combine it with data and others, because otherwise you're going to be looking at the complete wrong area.
Yes, I'm seeing a theme here that training and exercise of trusted data is an important area that we would have to address in order to, I guess, advertise the availability of something like a trusted data product. Any more ideas here? I think I was going to just move this page up to some of the notes that I had extracted from earlier sessions that we've had. There's some
You have the word technology interoperability, but could you put data interoperability? Because I think that it should be highlighted that that's an important aspect, because many of the different softwares we use say that they're data interoperability, but not all functions have a equal ability to manipulate the information. Data interoperability is something I think that could be expanded on in this trusted data to allow more successful use of the data. In other words, that it can be used not just to overlay one on top, but to actually interact with the other data. That's where this interoperability term really comes in.
Right. Right. Yeah, the data is used for situational awareness, but in some cases it might also be used for predicting what's going to happen next so that people can be prepared to respond.
Or often what I do is I take one data set from one agency, the polygon boundary, and use it to select, let's say, vulnerable population or critical care facilities within it. I need an ability to select a particular subset of the data and use it with another data. To me, that's where this data interoperability term really comes in the emergency, disaster response is when you have to have the data. You're doing analysis and you're trying to pull data from a mixture of different data sources. And that's where that exercising it in exercises really comes into play, as it lets you practice using the information together with different agencies' data, right?
Right. Yeah, you remind me, we had a really good discussion with David Green, who heads up the NASA disasters work in the applied sciences, and he was really emphasizing the idea of exercising, doing, he called them, I think, tabletop exercises of the data. And that's all part of that training and preparedness step.
So Karen, this is Trip again, coming out of a recent meeting with David and his team where they were kind of trying to determine how long they might keep data products that they were producing for disasters. That might also be a field that we want to encourage in the metadata or potentially include, somewhere in the definition of how long will this data be available following the first day of the disaster, day plus one. I don't want to say end of disaster because everybody might have a different idea of what that is, but for instance, if I was an organization and I used some quote unquote trusted data to make some decisions and everything went really well or something went really badly, afterwards I'm going to be doing kind of a look back to see, all right, what went well, what went wrong. And all of a sudden, if I can't find that data set, let's say it's available as a service and that service is taken down, or something happens to it, that could be problematic for me, especially with folks that might have to deal with regulatory stuff. So part of our definition, we might want to consider also data availability longevity. That way, folks could kind of make educated decisions when they're looking at the metadata of the data to say, all right, well, this is only going to be available for 2 months after the first day of the disaster, noting that I might want to look at it afterwards, or I've got regulatory requirements down the line where I might have to come look back at this. I need to download a copy of this data locally and keep it. So we might also want to look at data availability post-disaster if we are talking about trusted data stuff.
Yeah, I used to be involved with the international CEOS the CEOS activities where other countries, their approach to providing data, where they will typically have the data available for sale, but in the case of a disaster, they'd worked out the arrangements. I just forgot the name of the group, but anyway, the international group handling disasters and providing this data for free in the case of disaster, but they were very, very specific about who could get access to it and for what reasons. And so I think that your point is well taken, that you kind of want to know that about the data. Yeah, extensive availability issues that might come up. So let me see, I'm just going to look at the rest of these notes here. Okay, I think the other thing I wanted to share today is something that Dave Jones has been working, and I think Ken was a little bit involved in this discussion as well, with the All Hazards Consortium. We're talking about operational readiness levels, and this briefing package here was intended to kind of explain that. Maybe I'll just kind of go through this real quickly because I think it will relate to some of the issues that trusted data has to address. And we talked about operationalizing a data product and what it might mean, and this operational readiness level was an attempt that we had to try to address that. So anyway, what I'm showing right now is the technology readiness levels, something I lived with for many years at NASA, and kind of going from that idea of the low levels, 1 through 3, being kind of research-oriented, 4 through 6 being kind of test and evaluation, and then 7, 8, and 9 moving it from a test phase into proven successful mission operations. So taking those kinds of ideas and then mapping them to operational data. This was some of the ideas that I think came out of that discussion, and I think that Aaron might have been involved in generating this chart. And let me just ask a quick question of Ken. If were you involved, Ken, when these charts were developed? That'd be Ken Kaiser. Are you still here?
I don't see him on the meeting anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I know that we had used the TRL levels to look at other ways of evaluating the maturity of data services and data products and software, a number of things. So in terms of seeing how ready data is to be operationally used, this was kind of the first step. And the idea that some of the data you're basically looking at in the researchy phase of operational data. This data exists somewhere, and it might be fairly mature data, but is it mature for your particular use in a, you know, in being prepared for a certain kind of disaster? So that's kind of this discovery and feasibility phase. And then there would be steps here. Well, in the middle area, basically, you would want to test and evaluate. That kind of goes along with what Phil was saying about being able to use that data in exercises or tabletop experiments to get the end users involved in really understanding how that data works. And then once those steps have been, you know, the data has kind of been qualified there, the final step would be this operationalizing it. So that means creating the whole data path from its creation into direct access, especially important for situational awareness types of data products, which would be your 24/7 kind of monitoring, which I learned, you know, a lot of the All Hazards Consortium people have that function going on. And while they're doing their situational awareness, they're also doing their kind of regular maintenance or backfilling orders and things where, you know, problems have occurred, or repairing power outages in, you know, in the smaller areas that were maybe due to other kinds of problems and not this impending storm. So there's those kinds of things happening during situational awareness. That would be one way operationalized data would be kind of continually flowing in. And then when you actually have an impending disaster, certain kinds of predictions are very useful, knowing as precisely as possible where a storm is going to land. There's definitely more research about tornadoes and really significant events. And how do you operationalize those kinds of products then that would be brought in when the need gets really time critical? So this next view, Dave Jones and his work with some of the folks, and I wasn't part of this discussion, but they kind of flip the numbers around so that operational readiness level 1 is your most ready instead of your most immature. It is now your most mature, and that seemed to resonate with the community that's going to be using this. So we're just going to flip those numbers around. But came up with this level of 4. So it was kind of starting again down at the bottom. Level 4, you're basically collecting and testing your data. You're evaluating it for accuracy, and he even put a time frame that this is something that you might be doing a year in advance in part of your preparation, or say in the case of some of our ESIP members, you might have a data product and now you want to think that it might be useful for this community. This is the discovery and testing phase to verify that. Then moving up to ORL 3, these are kind of experimental data, and I kind of got the idea that a lot of NASA data, because it's research versus operations, a lot of NASA data is kind of considered experimental. However, I also felt that should that data prove to be really valuable in the All Hazards Consortium world, they would be quite happy to take it, even if it was only going to be available during the life of a mission or 3 or 4 years, where you're getting that current data product processed through. So ORL 3 is it's not guaranteed that you're going to be able to get this data when you need it. ORL 2, the data is sporadically available. Some data products, coming from 16-day repeat cycles are going to be only sporadically available. There might be other data falling into that realm. And the event-driven data, there might be. We talked a little bit at the session we had last Monday about drones, and I think that I want to say the Department of Homeland Security and FEMA kind of looking at the potential of, actually I think they're beyond the potential, but looking at how drones can be helpful. And so that would be, data that is triggered by the event and collected and processed. So I think those kinds of things would fall into ORL 2. And then ORL 1 is your your highest level of trusted data. I guess we would have some discussions to say, how we might map these ideas of operational readiness into trusted data. But the idea that they're operationally ready data products. They're available. Everybody knows. Everybody who's using it knows exactly how to use it, and they can. That's interesting. They each in these levels that they know who to call if any problems arise. So I think that there might be a good interaction between this idea of operational readiness levels and our trusted data. I thought it would be worth kind of bringing it out in today's discussion. So let me just open it up to discussions, people's comments and feedback on this part.
Karen, I really like how you have a number 2 could be useful for decision making and your conversation about are people using it. I think that some of your efforts, the people that we work with, like NASA JPL, really do an effort of getting the data that they have created regularly used in exercises and real events. They do outreach, and so I agree with absolutely the 1 and 2. It's immediately available for decision making. I like the reference of, people are using it, and the effort has, in terms of operationalizing it, I think if you see folks that are using it regularly and giving feedback and seeing changes being made because of the feedback, that makes it, in my view, highly valuable, because you have somebody you're working with, they're making changes with it, you're seeing it being used, and it's evolving over time. I don't see recognition quite yet on some of these products that are created. Often they just evolve over time. You increase or simplify in some cases the output because your users are finding it easier for or better for decision making. So if that could be worked in, but again, I really like what you have in the first 2 areas about, an emphasis on what makes operational data and trusted data, is that, people are making that effort to reach out and make sure, it's people are learning about it, they're using it. So I'm just kind of appreciating what you wrote there and offering some comments on it.
Yeah, thank you. I think those are good points. It does kind of get back to some of the research that's been done on trusted data, that it's somehow the community of users needs to have some visibility into what their colleagues are doing, so that they can see, that this is being used regularly, and how it's being used, and how it's effective in that use, and that's going to then build the credibility in that data product.
Hey, Karen. This is Bill Tanner-Carter.
Oh, hi, Bill.
Hi. I'm not sure if this is implied. Well, first of all, I also really like this. I think the TRLs are very useful, and I think this is similarly useful. But I was wondering if it's implied that the definition is with respect to the particular application or the particular operational use, because what may be level 2 for one may not be that for some other use, because disaster has different time constraints or time needs. So I was just wondering if this is implied in the scale here.
I think that's an excellent point. So a specific data product might be an operational readiness level 1 for one domain, one type of disaster use, but for a different one, it might not have reached for a different domain and application and use. It might be at ORL 2 or less even. No, I think that is a really good point. One of the things that had come up in the discussions was regarding damage assessment. And so there's a lot of really good work being done in damage assessment for earthquakes and structural integrity, but do those products, how would they work if you're looking at a damage assessment due to flooding? So it's, you know, a different disaster, and what kind of you know, information you can extract, or what kind of assessment, damage assessment you can make with different kinds. So I think that's a good point, that there probably is a relationship between trusted data and operational readiness levels as we evolve both of these ideas, but they don't necessarily lead one right into the other.
Karen, is this the 4 levels? Is that something that's already been fixed, or is it open? I guess I would argue that there is a big difference in maturity between something that's nominally operational or just initially operational versus something that I think other people have said is more mature and highly used, has all, you know, some important bells and whistles to ensure higher RMA and you know, notifications to users that, oh, there's maintenance going on, or you know, regular, this is a test situation, you know, the kind of thing that you would invest in to go from just initially having a service available to having something that was higher quality, more robust, and so forth. And just seems like that number 1 is too broad, that there ought to be, you know, a 1 A, B, and C, or split 1 up and have 5 categories, something.
So, yeah, I guess one of the things I think that Dave was trying to do was to make this idea of operational readiness levels simpler. And so, and I did hear feedback from the All Hazards group, for whom data-driven decision making is not their main business. Data is not their main business. Their main business is responding to their customers when disasters hit. So, so I think that was part of the reason for pushing for just the 4 levels instead of the more complete. But in terms of our use in the way that we might look at these operational readiness levels in reflecting or in relationship to trusted data, I do think, yeah, we would want to kind of make sure we've got all the bases covered. So this is a work in progress, and I kind of see it as a specialized view for that particular community. I think that from ESIP Federation's point of view, if we wanted to, you know, kind of stay with that 9 level, you know, if we find some of these nuances are better described with something more akin to the 9 levels, we certainly can do that.
Yeah, I'm not really arguing for 9, but I kind of think 1 is, it might be useful if somebody is in the industry picking between a mature operational service and a new operational service, that might make a difference. So I'm only arguing sort of at this point for splitting 1. I think 2, 3, and 4 seem fine. But I certainly agree 9 is too much.
Yeah, for a community, yeah, outside of this. Yeah, they seem quite happy with the 4. So yeah, so your point with level 1 really had to do with the idea of a routinely available product, available now all the time, and they know how to use it, versus a new one now that you're introducing, and it's gone through some of the earlier stages, but it's you know, like ORL 3, where you're basically testing it out.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have, you know, in my center, we have released app and a whole bunch of services, and, you know, we consider them operational, and I think they meet the basic criteria. I guess what I'm interested in is to really serve a community like in the all hazards community. What are the additional, you know, complementary services and characteristics that would make it more useful? I mean, one we heard earlier was the ability to go back and make sure that it's there, or that it's a commitment to make it be there in the longer term, which you may not be able to make when you first make something operational, because you don't really know if people are going to use it. So I just think there is a maturity level that might be captured once you know, between something that is sort of got basic operations in place versus something that, you know, is pretty mature, has a lot of ancillary information and, you know, a track record of reliability that people can count on. And so that's sort of what I'm getting at. It's just that there's, to me, there's a big range embedded in ORL 1.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And you'll be at the meeting in April, I believe, April 13th.
Yeah, I'm getting back from a meeting, RDA meeting, and yet the day before, but I should be there on early morning downtown.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to be there. So this will be discussed, or at least introduced during that meeting. I think that meeting is definitely going to focus on use cases and getting more buy-in, you know, from the group. And I'm hopeful that the use cases will then be something we can go back and refer to as we start, you know, evaluating various data products that we want to offer for test and evaluation to the All Hazards Consortium group. All right, well, we're up at our hour now. I really thank everybody for calling in today. I think this was a really useful discussion and getting into some detail. Let me just see, are there any final comments people have? Okay, very good. Well, I think we'll be touching on this for, we have our regular first Thursday of the month telecon next week. So we'll report back on this, and hopefully I'll be able to take some of my notes and get them down in writing. Otherwise, I'll lose them. But we'll follow up on Thursday, and thank you very much. There will also be a recording if anybody wanted to get here and missed today's